Hello, my bookhos. I hope you've had a wonderful and restful vacation before the chaos that we are currently in 2022. If you've also embraced nihilism this year, join the club. Hello and welcome to Bookhoarding by Bianca. I'm Bianca. Today I'm going to be going over my dress parts once again, and I'll be covering my cute little puff sleeves, which I think make a great addition to anything, and I'm obsessed with puff sleeves. And no, I actually didn't really like Anne of Green Gables ever. For those who always ask if that was a thing I was obsessed with, puff sleeves. No, wasn't. Sorry. So if you've been following my little series where I go over the dress that I had to make for a patterning class final, basically I've been going over the components of this and how I pattern them so that it was easier to understand, and the focus is less construction but much more on actually the patterning and how you get from like a block to the final piece. That being said, I hope this is really helpful if you are trying to modify existing things as well, because you can really use an existing pattern that you have, use that as a starting point to modify as you need, using a lot of the same principles. For example, these puff sleeves I'm probably going to be using for a Regency basis now, because they're really easy. They hit about where I want it to hit for a Regency dress, and now I can modify them. I'll probably need to, change up where they hit on the shoulder line, just because of where Regency dresses are going to, they're gonna hit different. But they're a cool little thing to have. If you wanted to make these much bigger, bigger and puffier and do more volume, you could definitely just add them onto your 1830s dresses as like the minor puff that they had. Probably work as like a pretty decent base for like the puffers that they had for the 1830s too. This is a really basic pattern manipulation that you can use beyond just using a sloper. You can use it for anything that you have available to you. If you already have commercial patterns, you can use the same principle. All that technical stuff aside, I am tired. I'm so sleepy today. I had tea, but it's not helping. I don't know what it was. We did sword practice today, and I'm trying to do more of that. And basically I use my new spear. And like spears are great because like I am short, and spear is great because I can just be like from a distance. But that also means that now I'm tired because I did a lot of things. And now my husband's making noise downstairs. While you're here, also don't forget to check out, I'm currently doing a Regency sew along right now from January 2022 to April of 2022, where I'm just like hosting a sew along that is in a community space that, yes, is a Facebook group, but if we get enough interest, I'll make a Discord server. But basically it's a place for people to talk about making Regency costumes of their choosing, and also please like be considerate of others and like, help each other find ways to not only create your visions, but also feel good in what you're making. The place is not going to be racist or fatphobic, so like, please don't come in there with some of the issues of the era or issues of other eras and bring them in and be a jerk. It's also a not accuracy gatekeeping place. Like, this is not a place for historical accuracy. I am definitely going to be making things that are not accurate to the era at all, that are going to be beautifully obscene, and if you aren't okay with that, that's not the sew along for you. And it's free to take part in, because historical costuming is expensive enough, and if you're already having to make something, that's already a lot of leaps and bounds that you need to make in terms of budget and skill and privilege. The least I can do is making sure that it's no cost to be in a space where then you can share your knowledge with others and also get knowledge from other people. But that's a thing that you can join in, and also that group's going to exist beyond the sew along, so definitely check it out if you can't sew something right now. I also have a whole video that explains the entirety of the project, so check that out, I guess. Back to the dress though. I'm going to go into the patterning of these sleeves. If you want to follow along, I'd say the things that you definitely need: patterning paper, rulers, pens, lots of rulers, tape, different kinds of paper. Those are like the main things that you need for patterning a thing. I will say too, I use a sloper, a sleeve sloper that I have. But again, if you have a sleeve that you've used for a project that works for you, use that pattern and see what happens. Obviously, it would need to be like a basic sleeve without any kind of puff or extra stuff, or some things that you can just kind of cut off. So keep that in mind. And now let's get to the make. Welcome to another session of chaotic voiceover by Bianca. So get a sloper, get your sleeve sloper. Obviously this is half scale. I mean, I say obviously, but maybe some of you think my arms are this small. Anyway, now you're going to see here, because of half scale, because I'm working with a small sloper, that I'm just using like the elbow kind of notch area for this example sleeve. You're not going to want to do that you know, for your own, you're probably going to want to have it be a midpoint between the elbow and the shoulder. But for the sake of working on the small stuff, I decided to make it a little bit larger, aka like easier to sew and to see and visualize. So the thing I'm going to do here is just fold this, true up that edge, which is what I'm doing there when I cut off the thing that's sticking out. Let's trim it up, make sure it matches. And now I have top of a sleeve. And I'm going to expand that with something called equal fullness. You're going to see here that I have a folded piece of paper, and this is how I was taught in my fashion patterning classes. Instead of making the whole sleeve, just use half and then expand it. And I'll show you what that means in a second. So I have this folded, and I'm just going to draw some lines evenly throughout. And you can see I'm going to try to unfold it. And I'm just going to cut off that half, because if I'm only making, like, if I'm only doing a working pattern for half the sleeve and then expanding it to the full sleeve, I only need half of it, right? And especially if I'm doing equal fullness, which means it's going to be equal on both sides. Now, what I should have done before I started cutting was label everything, so I had everything in the right order, but no. And you can see, because it's off the roll, the paper tends to roll around. But don't be like me. Number your pieces and mark them. So I'm just going to lay that on the edge, because that's the middle point. And then I'm going to spread these out. Now, I should have drawn a line at the bottom. Will I do it? Am I going to do it? Yes. Oh, thank goodness. So the thing that you do for sleeves like this, that you're adding fullness to, equal fullness, just draw a line so that you can line up the bottom of that sleeve. That bottom of that sleeve is supposed to be even. I mean, it works the same for anything. If you want it to all have the same bottom line and you're doing this equal fullness thing, you're going to have to blend the top, but the bottom can just be a line that you draw on the pattern to line it up. That's what I'm doing here. And I'm just taping these pieces down so I can make this working pattern. For the full-size version, I definitely cut more pieces than just 3 per side. So that's the difference that you'll notice. Look at me taping things. The other thing too is, like, the larger you make it, obviously, the more that blending is going to have to happen. So that's what I'm doing here. I'm blending. So you're going to want to make sure that you are just, and you can get your French curve out for this to make it much smoother. And I'm guesstimating where the notch should be for this. That's bad practice on my part. I should have put the notches in ahead of time. Should have had them on my slipper. But, you know, here we are. The notch tells you basically how it attaches to the bodice piece where the arm side is. So yeah, just cutting this out. Again, no seam allowance for the working pattern. And it was on the fold, if we remember. So by the time I cut this out, we will have, if I can get this to work, we will have a full pattern piece. And that's the pattern piece in full. So now I'm switching gears and I will be working on the band, the sleeve band. So you can measure this out. Honestly, you don't need, like, I use some of the pattern piece to help me, and then I just pull in the ruler. But you basically want to make sure that it is matching for the puff sleeve specifically, it needs to match the width of the non-expanded sleeve, that makes sense. So, like, we added fullness to this by slashing and spreading. But the band is going to need to cinch all of that fullness back in at the bottom if that's where you want fullness. So that's why we have to make this band. And again, I did it on the fold. It's one of those easier things. It makes it easier for having a pattern pieces and cutting out, all those little things. But the band working pattern for the sleeve is just going to exactly match the width of that unlengthened, unfullnessed, if you will, sleeve. Bottom. Yes. I determined the height. You basically want to triple what you're looking for the band, if that makes sense, at minimum. Like if you're just doing a bound edge and it's like a half inch, a half inch, a half inch, plus like maybe a little more, just in case if you have a finicky material, you want to fold under, you know, there are all these little things, but for a basic bound edge, it would just be like 3 times the height, I guess, length, whatever. Anyway, now I'm going to be making my actual, quote, final pattern, if there's such a thing. I just mark the midpoints there so I have it on the pattern. It's helpful. And you can't see, but I'm just literally just tracing that onto the paper. And then for this, for sure, you want French curves to deal with this. And you can Google like free French curves if you want, and you can get printable ones. And then you can just copy those onto like cardstock or something. Use the plastic from a to-go container or something if you like really need to budget this, or you just want to be sustainable. I don't know. Whatever your choices are, embrace it, be crafty. I had someone offer to buy me French curves, and so I took them up on it. That's why we are here today. Anyway, then I'm doing the band, and I did the full size for both, right? And this keeps curling on me. If someone has a better solution than just ironing paper on low for getting things to stop curling back up on me, I would appreciate it, friends. Anyway, so I'm working in half scale, so I'm just adding a 1/4 inch seam allowance to this. Theoretically, in full scale, you add a 1/2 inch seam allowance to everything. And then I'm marking my pieces, sleeve band. I need to also put the grain lines in there. Please put the grain lines in there. And then theoretically too, I'd put little like notches to like basically denote that this is going to be gathered. One day I will make a video that goes over all the commercial pattern markings that I've learned that might be useful for folks who are either trying to learn how to use it. Yeah, these little lines just mean gather. Because it's basically indicating like these notches are going to have to add like match up to the other notches on the sleeve band or the bodice, and theoretically I would be putting those notches in to my pattern, but I think I forgot to put all of them in. And then you notice that I put a second little notch line for the left side, which is the back. So notches on the back of garments have 2, typically 2 little slashes, 2 little dots, whatever it is, and the front has 1. Now you're seeing here, this is how I go about adding that seam allowance. I'll go in first with my ruler. Quilting ruler is super helpful because it's clear, and then I will go in after with my French curve to smooth out those lines. I'm sure people have better, smarter methods, faster methods. I'm sure people can eyeball it. I know I have been in class with people who can eyeball this, so kudos to y'all. I changed the ruler. You saw I just pivoted it so it was 90 degrees to the seam allowance at the corner. It's because that little like bloop at the edge of the sleeve needs to match up to the other, and you're not going to have them like angled down. That needs to be a 90-degree angle at like the end of the bell curve essentially of this sleeve. So the front of the curve and the end of that curve of that like little bell curve that you're seeing have to be at 90 degrees. That's how fabric should match up. It's the same thing for the arm side on the bodice. It theoretically has to be at 90 degrees so that it matches up completely, because it's a 1/2 inch seam allowance. So like having it go in would mean that like it's uneven when you're sewing it and such, and it's not actually a 1/2 inch at some points. It's a whole thing. Anyway, this is how I made the half scale puff sleeve, and I have footage of it in a second that you'll see, but this is yeah, my little half scale. Again, reminder, please, if you use rotary cutters, make sure you have a rotary cutter mat. I 100% support using rotary cutters. This is a small blade that I have from Olfa, and I use it just for paper craft things, aka pattern making, and it is so smooth and so nice. I cut out my commercial patterns with this too. in this way because it's just so much easier than using scissors. And I have a standing desk, so it's ergonomic. Anyway, here is super fast footage of me cutting this out. I should have marked green line, but didn't. Whatever. And then here's like it attached to the half scale dress. And you can see there, look at it. It's a little puffy little baby. Obviously, like on the half scale, you can tell it. Proportions are weird in the half scale, you know? But you can tell in the half scale that it's like a little wonky, but like it's puffed. Because it's like an elbow length puff sleeve. But it's fine. It's fine. And then here's a little bit of footage of me doing this at my table that I just mentioned and talked about my standing table. This is my full scale sleeve sloper. Again, you can see the paper's just curling up. I honestly believe that like I ironed some of these, especially I know I ironed some of these pieces, but ahead of my final being turned in just so that it would photograph. Then you just saw me measuring where I want that sleeve to end. And then I'm folding the sleeve in half. And folding again. This is like an attempt to make the paper lay flat, actually, more than anything else. Because I'm just like, please, stop it. And then I'm going to measure down from where my arm was, where I want it to end. I'm going to mark it in the center, because I measured the center for that marking. And then I'll be measuring across and cutting out. So once you do this, again, you can like reference the half scale that I did. But it's pretty much gonna be the same, only big. And you can see too, like all the paper I cut off, I'm probably just going to use, I'm just going to use to help with my working pattern. Because it's a lot of paper for the rest of the sleeve sloper. But, you know, you kind of need the full sloper. I mean, I did, because I need to figure out where things are, because I'm still learning. So I'm truing up that edge. Just had it folded, truing up the edge so it's going to match. And then what I did was I hadn't marked this, so I just folded it up a few times to have that evenness, to figure out where I was going to cut and add that equal fullness. Just cut the middle. Pop it on a thing. The other benefit of half scale, while I'm thinking about it, is when you do them, I have a little half scale pattern book that literally I can like label what I did, what part of the garment they're for, all those things, and it's really, really helpful just to have that. So again, I'm just cutting the pattern pieces and popping them on. I should have drawn the line, but whatever. I'm taping this on, and again, this is like half of a piece of paper because I didn't fold a full piece of my alphanumeric paper. There, I'm drawing the line finally. But I mean, it's just like anything on the fold. You can draw little hashes and then just flip over the paper. You can fold the paper and then, you know, draw the whole thing. Either way, whatever works for you. Now, this is the only real footage I have of working on the sleeves on my fashion fabric. And I'm just putting the notches in. I did put the grain line in. And I'm just giving little tickies with the scissors for my notches. But I'm essentially just going to be like hand gathering all this and putting it into the sleeve. And then pinning it. And then sewing it down. Nothing fancy. As I mentioned in my other videos about making this dress, I focused way less in these videos on construction and way more on the patterning process. If you want me to go into construction stuff, I totally can. I just felt like, because the whole focus of the assignment was patterning, that was the focus of my videos. Anyway, so I cut these out late at night, and I'll just checking that they look like they matched up okay. And I also used my little chalk pencil thing to work out those notches a little better, just so that I could see them, because I was clearly already having trouble with like this darker fabric, and I hadn't cut too deep. You can see me looking for it. Oh my god, that's hilarious. I hadn't cut too deep into it because this fabric frays really easily, But yeah, if you're working with like finicky fabrics, just like, you don't have to cut the notch into them. You can just try to mark these things. If you use an awl or whatever, or you actually use a notcher in the pattern, then you'll have a space to put those marks. And then I'm just going to do the same for the sleeve bands. And again, sew them together. And your sewing style is up to you, whether you make the sleeve completely or you do other things. First, I don't know, pick your own adventure. And now let's talk about the make. Overall, I'd say these are like really fun. They're cute. I loved how they turned out. I definitely think that I might just like do a really basic like extend them down thing. Maybe flare them out a little bit more at the end to make just like a basic bishop sleeve, or even like a little bit of like what I'm saying, like the Laudna sleeve on her costume. Not that I'm making a Critical Role costume, because like I have too many costumes on my to-do list. But like I do have the fabric for her shirt. Before I go into a rabbit hole of a different costume that I don't have time to make, but I do have the supplies for, this is, again, like one in a series of things about making different components of this dress, and I parse them out specifically so that maybe they'd be useful if you're looking for a specific skill set or thing, because these are working off of different blocks. If you have more questions about pattern blocks and slopers and drafting your own, again, I will link to the Closet Historian, who actually has a whole playlist and is a pro at walking you through that. And I am 100% going to fashion classes because of her work and the amazing education that she gives back to her community. Thank you for joining me. Don't forget to check out my first video, which is on the making of this bodice, and then stay tuned because I do have a video coming up on the making of the skirt. Thank you for joining me, and don't forget to make it so.